Hello students, welcome to today's class. Today we are going to talk about Eysencks theory of personality. Eysencks theory of personality is known as trait-cum-type theory. The main objectives in this lesson are basically to understand what is trait-cum-type approach. We are going to specifically study about Eysencks theory of personality. Under this, we will know about personal history of Hans J. Eysencks, dimensions of the personality proposed by Eysencks, and organization of individual behavior. From our childhood days, we must have spent considerable time thinking about who we are and how we are different from others. By now, we already may have developed some idea about ourselves. So, when asked to describe ourselves, we generally use certain words or traits like friendly, helpful, curious, hardworking, etc. Further, we may also categorize ourselves into different types such as extroverts or introverts. Thus, traits or types, we are basically trying to understand our own personality. For a lay person, personality generally refers to the physical or external appearance of an individual. For example, when we find someone good looking, we often assume that the person also has a charming personality. This notion of personality is based on superficial impressions which may not be correct. In psychological terms, personality refers to our characteristic ways of responding to individuals and situations. People can easily describe the way in which they respond to various situations. Certain catchwords, for example, shy, sensitive, quiet, concerned, warm, etc., are often used to describe personalities. These words refer to different components of personality. In this sense, personality refers to unique and relatively stable qualities that characterize an individual's behavior across different situations over a period of time. Once we are able to characterize someone's personality, we can predict how that person will probably behave in a variety of circumstances. An understanding of personality allows us to deal with people in realistic and acceptable ways. As you know, there are various theories of personality proposed, which help us to understand the nature of personality. These different theories give us a diverse view about personality. In this particular module, we will understand personality in Eysencks' point of view. His theory is known as trait-cum-type approach. What is this trait-cum-type approach? A trait is a characteristic pattern of behavior or conscious motive which can be self-assessed or assessed by peers. Theories adopting trait approach try to describe people in terms of unique pattern of traits. They define trait as a relatively permanent and relatively consistent general behavior patterns that an individual exhibits in many situations. Whereas the term type is used to identify a certain collection of traits that make up a broad general personality classification. Theories adopting type approach try to classify people's personality into categories or types according to certain characteristics. Thus, personality typologies or traits are usually very appealing, but they are too simplistic. Some of the trait theories use very few traits to describe personality, and some other theories use huge number of traits in understanding personality. This kind of discrepancy makes trait theories poor predictors of behavior. On the other hand, assigning people to a particular personality type is difficult as human behavior is highly complex and viable. People do not fit into such simple categorization schemes so neatly. When such limitations are taken into consideration, the present theory, that is Eysencks theory, which is trait-cum-type approach, plays an important role to understand personality. Eysencks personality theory is considered as a true paradigm and most solid theory that psychology has offered. The theory best explains why each person has their own personality. Eysencks approach is based in personality theory. In order to understand this, one must consider that human behavior is determined by a series of attributes. These attributes or genetic traits are foundations of personality. They predispose individual to act in a certain way. In addition, Eysencks theory assumes that these traits vary among individuals. The theory also assumes that traits are coherent across different situations and remain more or less stable over time within an individual. He also believes that by isolating these genetic traits, one can see the deeper personality structure. Further, he explains that all these traits can be categorized into a type by explaining hierarchical model of personality. Thus, his theory is known as trait-cum-type approach. Before getting into the structure of the theory, let us know a little about history of Eysencks. Hans J. Eysencks was born in Germany. His hostility towards Hitler and the Nazis led him to move to England when he was 18 years and spent most of his working life there. His research interests were wide-ranging, but he is best known for his theories of personality and intelligence. He earned a PhD in psychology from University College London in 1940. During the Second World War, Eysencks worked as a research psychologist at Mill Hill Emergency Hospital. He later founded the psychology department at the University of London Institute of Psychiatry, where he continued to work until 1983. He served as Professor Emeritus at the school until his death in 1997. He was also an extremely creative writer. Over the course of his career, he published more than 75 books and over 1600 journal articles. In addition to being one of the most famous psychologists, he was also one of the most controversial. One of the earliest controversies revolved around a paper he wrote in 1952 on the effects of psychotherapy. Eysencks reported that 2/3 of therapy patients improved significantly or recovered within 2 years, regardless of whether or not they received psychotherapy. He was also a vocal critic of psychoanalysis, dismissing it as unscientific. Also, his suggestions that racial differences in intelligence were due to genetics rather than environment generated a tremendous amount of conflict. The greatest controversy surrounding Eysencks was his view of heritability of intelligence. However, Eysencks was a hugely influential figure in psychology. At the time of his death in 1997, he was the most frequently cited psychologist in scientific journals. Now, let us try to understand the theory proposed by Eysencks, getting into dimensions of personality. Eysencks proposed a theory of personality which is based on biological factors, arguing that individuals inherit a type of nervous system that affects their ability to learn and adapt to the environment. When Eysencks was working at psychiatric hospital, that is Mill Hill Emergency Hospital, his work was to make an initial assessment of each patient before their mental disorders were diagnosed by a psychiatrist. Through this, he compiled a battery of questions about behavior, which he later applied to 700 soldiers who were being treated in the hospital. He used a technique called factor analysis. This technique reduces behavior to number of factors which can be grouped together under separate categories. Thus, the basic dimensions in the form of personality traits by Cattell has been further regrouped, yielding fewer dimensions for the description of human behavior and personality. Eysencks used the term type for set of correlated traits or personality dimensions, specifically extraversion, introversion, neuroticism, stability, and psychoticism. According to Eysencks, each aspect of personality, that is extraversion, neuroticism and psychoticism, can be traced back to a different biological cause. Eysencks states that personality is dependent on the balance between excitation and inhibition process of autonomic nervous system. However, the term type as applied by Eysencks stands clearly for dimensions along a scale with a low end and a high end for putting people at various points between the two extremes. First, let us understand the first dimension, extraversion, introversion. Extroverts are sociable and crave excitement and change, and thus can become bored easily. They tend to be carefree, optimistic and impulsive. They are more likely to take risks and be thrill seekers. Eysencks argues that this is because they inherit an under-aroused nervous system and therefore seek stimulation to restore the level of optimum stimulation. Introverts, on the other hand, lie at the other end of the scale, being quiet and reserved. They are already over aroused and shun sensation and stimulation. Introverts are reserved, plan their actions and control their emotions. They tend to be serious, reliable and pessimistic. However, Eysencks believed that purely extroverts or purely introvert people were rarely found, and he therefore preferred to use a dimension that is a continuum ranging from introversion to extroversion instead of naming types as introverts and extroverts. The second dimension is neuroticism, the second major dimension suggested by Eysencks, which involves emotional instability at the lower end and emotional stability at the upper end, describing people as neurotic or not neurotic. A person's level of neuroticism is determined by the reactivity of their sympathetic nervous system. A stable person's nervous system will generally be less reactive to stressful situations, remaining calm and level-headed. But someone high on neuroticism, on the other hand, will be much more unstable and prone to overreacting to stimuli and may be quick to worry, anger or fear. They are overly emotional and find it difficult to calm down once upset. Neurotic individuals have autonomic nervous system that responds quickly to stress. High neuroticism incorporates mood swings, poor emotional adjustment, feelings of inferiority, a lack of social responsibility, a lack of persistence, issues of trust, suspiciousness, social shyness, hypochondria and the lack of relaxed composure. Neuroticism raises the intensity of emotional reactions. Individuals who measure high in neuroticism are more likely to suffer from neurosis. But high neuroticism is not necessarily less desirable than low levels of neuroticism. For example, aesthetic appreciation and creativity can benefit from an individual being highly emotional. On the clearly negative side, high levels of neuroticism have been routinely found in criminals, perhaps because whenever an individual has antisocial tendencies, a high level of neuroticism enhances their fear or anxiety responses and functions as a powerful and dysfunctional drive. Then comes the third dimension, psychoticism. Psychoticism was added to Eysencks' theory well after identifying extroversion and neuroticism. This has been related to high level of testosterone. The higher the testosterone, the higher the level of psychoticism, with low levels related to more normal balanced behavior. The level of person's psychoticism reflects their vulnerability to impulsiveness, aggressiveness and a lack of empathy. These people are often insensitive, antisocial, violent, aggressive and extravagant. The people high on this dimension tend to be solitary, insensitive, egocentric, impersonal, impulsive and opposed to accepted social norms, while those scoring low are found to be more empathetic and less adventurous and bold. Also, if a person scores high on psychoticism, they may be predisposed to various mental disorders such as psychosis. Unlike the other two dimensions, psychoticism doesn't have an opposite or inverse extreme. Instead, psychoticism is present at different levels in everybody. But Eysencks' theory majorly focuses on two dimensions, that is neuroticism and introversion extroversion. These two dimensions combine to form a variety of personality characteristics. Okay. These two factors create four combinations related to four basic temperaments which are recognized by ancient Greeks. These combinations can be seen in the figure. Combination 1 is introverted plus unstable. It is known as melancholic type, which is depicted in black color. The traits of these types are moody, anxious, rigid, sober, pessimistic, reserved, unsocial and quiet. Whereas combination 2 is extroverted plus unstable. It is known as choleric type, which is depicted in the yellow color. The traits of this type are touchy, restless, aggressive, excitable, changeable, impulsive, optimistic and active. Coming to combination 3, which is extroverted plus stable. This is known as sanguine type, which can be seen in red color. The traits of this type are sociable, outgoing, talkative, responsive, easygoing, lively, careful and a leader. Then combination 4 is introverted plus stable. It is known as phlegmatic type, which is depicted in green color. The traits of this type are passive, careful, thoughtful, peaceful, controlled, reliable, even tempered and calm. Next we are going to talk about how Eysencks explained organization of individual behavior. As said earlier, Eysencks' approach tries to synthesize the type and trait approaches. Starting with the trait approach, it yields definite personality types. While Cattell has tried to use the factor analysis technique to give some basic dimensions to personality by enumerating 16 basic traits, Eysencks went a step further in adapting factor analysis technique by extracting second order factors and grouping traits into definite personality types. How individual behavior is organized and acquires the shape of a definite type is explained in a hierarchical model, which can be seen in the figure. In organization of individual behavior, according to Eysencks, there are 4 levels of behavior organization. First, at the lowest level are the specific responses. They grow out of particular responses to any single act. Blushing, for example, is a specific response. Then the second level is habitual responses and comprise similar responses of an individual to similar situations. For example, studying alone, turning down invitations are habitual responses. At the third level is the organization of habitual acts into traits. Behavior acts which have similarities are said to belong to one group and are called traits. In the above example, the habitual responses that A and B etc. give birth to group traits called shyness. The fourth level is the organization of these traits into a general type. A type is defined as a group of correlated traits. Traits which are similar in nature give birth to definite type, just as shown in the figure, and traits like persistence and shyness have been grouped into a type termed as introversion. An ultimate distinct type is obtained at this final stage. A person can now be classified as an introvert if he has traits as described at the third level, habits and habit systems as described at the second level, and response specifically as described at the first level. Eysencks' work has clearly demonstrated that human behavior and personality can be very well organized into hierarchy with specific responses at the bottom and the definite personality type at the top. In fact, in this work, what was described as basic dimensions in the form of personality traits by Cattell has been further regrouped, yielding fewer dimensions for the description of human behavior and personality. The contribution of Eysencks' theory to describing, explaining and predicting one's behavior and personality are notable and worthy of praise. He has presented a viable synthesis of the trait and type approaches, given personality a biological cum hereditary base, accepted the role of environmental influences in shaping and developing personality, and exploded many myths and overgeneralization of psychoanalytic theory. In addition to its close focus on individual differences and principle of behavioral changes, his theory has contributed to the study of criminology, education, aesthetics, genetics, psychopathology and political ideology. Next, we are going to know about a case study. Criminal personality and Eysencks model. Criminality was and is one of the biggest unknown thing about human beings that the theorists have attempted to explain. Sometimes they were successful and other times they did not come up with any good answers. But there has been lot of research done on understanding the personality of a criminal. One such is Eysencks' model of criminal personality. To explain criminal personality using this model, one has to have to understand what is a crime. A crime involves taking on certain risks and extreme behaviors like lack of concern for other people's well-being and property. That's why, according to Eysencks' model, there is a combination that makes up a criminal personality. First, there is a high degree of extroversion. Boldness, lack of concern, which are basic traits of extroversion, are also two major elements in committing a crime. That is, one has to be an extrovert most of the times to be a criminal. For example, one has to be brave to rob a bank. Then secondly, A criminal is also defined as having low levels of neuroticism. Their limbic system does not turn on as fast when it receives stimuli. That has a very specific result in the moment they think about committing a crime. It means they won't be looking at the future consequences of their actions. On the top of that, the stimuli doesn't activate the autonomic nervous system's sympathetic nervous system. That will stop them from feeling guilty and regretting what they did later on. Lastly, someone who has committed a crime will have a high degree of psychoticism. That means they don't feel empathy and are unconcerned about what they have done. Finally, let us summarize what we have learnt in today's module. The term personality does not only refer to the external aspects of an individual, but is based on how people react to other people and to situations. Trait theories and type theories are one of the most popular and appealing theories of personality. After understanding the limitations of these theories, Eysencks came up with his own theory, which is known as trait-cum-type approach. Hans J. Eysencks was a very influential psychologist. He was a German but spent most of his life in London, working in University College London. His theory is based on biological factors. He emphasized on the importance of how nervous system affects the ability to learn and then to adapt. Through the technique of factor analysis, he formulated 3 dimensions of personality, that is extraversion, introversion, neuroticism, stability and psychoticism. This theory majorly focuses on 2 dimensions of extraversion, introversion and neuroticism, and then came up with 4 combinations of personality. Eysencks' theory synthesized type and trait approaches. It states that an individual acquires the shape of definite type through various traits. The 4 levels of hierarchical model explained by Eysencks are specific behaviors, habitual responses, traits and types. In conclusion, it can be said that Eysencks has contributed a great deal to the field of psychology by providing a solid personality theory. After understanding how introversion type is formed using hierarchical model of Eysencks theory, let us take an example of an extroversion. In extroversion, at the lowest level are the traits or the specific behaviors such as being very talkative. When this moves to the habitual responses, traits such as partying or participating in a protest becomes the habitual responses of an individual. At the 3rd level, these habitual responses turn into traits, basically a group of traits such as boldness, openness, easygoing, etc. Later on, at the final level, all these traits can be grouped into a type which we call it as extroversion. Using hierarchical model and understanding the 4 levels, the various traits of extroversion can be grouped together and given the name extroversion as a type.